Hello, I am the Dungeon Tutor. Welcome. Since 2016, I've been answering your questions, giving advice and inspiration to countless gamers. Here, you can ask questions in the comments and get your own videos as an answer. So I encourage you, enjoy by all means. But come back to visit with your friend, the Dungeon Tutor. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am the Dungeon Tutor. Welcome! Today is day 13 of RPGaDay. And for the 13th day, the topic is darkness. Now, darkness is an interesting concept when applied to role-playing games. It's one of those things that a lot of people really, really hate. Because taking away things from your player character is by far one of the scariest thoughts that some players will have about what can happen to their characters. You can kill them, sure. That's an ending. Then they can make a new character, or they can be brought back maybe. But once you start messing with what a character can see, can do, people start to get panicky or angry, one or the other. Personally, I really hate darkness when I'm playing. I don't like my character not being able to do stuff. And depending on the edition, it may not be even that big of an impediment. Only disadvantage is not that terrible. It's not going to be enough to completely stop you from succeeding if you are destined to succeed. That reroll may not slow you down very much, and that's cool. Other games, not being able to see is pretty brutal. Now, of course, darkness that doesn't affect your enemies is even better. When it's on your side. When it's on the other side and they can still see you and you can't see them, that's brutal. And yeah, darkness is rough. Honestly, if you ever need to punch up an encounter, throw some darkness in. But darkness is what I call a soft environmental hazard. It can be a tactical environmental hazard if you, for example, use darkness to impede your opponents. It's much like modern day using a smoke grenade to disorient and distract your opponents. When used on your side, it's great when it works. Being able to stop your opponents from being able to see makes them panicky maybe, makes them make bad decisions, may make them waste their efforts. Yeah, darkness can be a great tactical tool or some other form of obfuscation. But when used against you, yeah, players generally hate that. And when this applies to anything that obfuscates. So if your characters are facing a silenced foe and all of a sudden noise can't be used to outline your opponent, yeah, it's something that players are going to be rather annoyed with, especially if you take away all of their sense of hearing. Not just that they can't hear the opponent, but they can't hear anything. That's a scary and isolating thought. Now, as a person myself who has undergone changes to my vision as I have aged, the thought of losing one's vision is terrifying. It really is. I'm grateful for what I have left, but I used to have perfect 20/20 vision. Now I have significantly less than that. And it's a terrifying thought. The idea of not being able to see is something that many people have to face. It is something that is kind of, forces you to have a little bit of empathy for those people who are going through that kind of a struggle. But definitely not something that you want your power fantasy character to have to experience yourself. So Game Masters, if you want to make something a bit more dangerous, a bit more scary, throw ample amounts of darkness in. Even if the players can thwart it, they have to use the resources to do so. They might need to use their hand to light a torch and hold it up rather than hold a shield or hold their weapon. That becomes significant. In a game like Shadow Dark, your torches last 1 hour, no matter what's going on. So if your party is sitting and scheming and their torches run out, your light source goes out. What are you going to do? And if you don't have more torches, the answer is usually you're in a lot of trouble. So, yeah, it's fighting against an ever-present foe in the darkness around you kind of a significant thing. Some games worse than others. But it never becomes a non-issue. If your characters are deprived of their senses, they are going to be at a massive disadvantage. And your players are almost certainly going to panic. So, there you are. If you want to punch up an encounter, darkness, fog, ways of stopping your players from looking where they want to see and knowing all there is terrifying, especially in a line of work where life and death are commonplace. So, as game masters, using darkness in encounters, how do you do it? Well, first of all, look at the natural light. That's the obvious one. If you're in a dungeon and there's no ambient light, then that might be a form of darkness that will be ever present in front of the players to change that. Bear in mind that darkness does work against monsters and creatures too. Even if you have the ability to use dark vision of some sort, you still can't read. You can't do a lot of civilized things in the dark. So even races that are underground still prefer to have some light around. Unless they are, primitive and get nothing out of reading. Which, may happen, certainly. Some creatures don't care about reading. They don't care about colors and their variances. So if art isn't a concern for your creatures, for instance, maybe that isn't such a bad thing. Maybe they would prefer to be just fine in the dark. But a lot of other people generally prefer to have some light. Even, goblins and orcs and hobgoblins and any other creatures that get some sort of dark vision probably would know to use light to certain extents, if for no other reason than to lure people with the promise of light into traps or disadvantages. So that is another dimension that you can consider when making your encounters, when building a lair or anything like that. The value of light versus darkness is actually a pretty significant one in a lot of scenarios, a lot of encounters. Light draws attention. Just like when the players are walking around in a dungeon with their lights on, the monsters can see them a ways away and plan for them. So, just a thought. It is another level of using your senses. Picking up light values is something that we're inherently, programmed to look for. So, if you as a game master choose not to include the sources of light or the potency of light in your descriptions, you may be missing out on an opportunity to deliver some information to your players. Information their characters might intuitively grasp. So, something to think about. I always like to give my players the benefit of the doubt their characters know what they're doing, and they can infer basic information about what they see. That's an aspect of it. So, thank you for joining me. I do appreciate you. This little talk about darkness. It's very underrated as far as any game master who's ever not used darkness to spice up encounters. Once you start doing that once in a while, and your players work really hard to make sure that isn't an impediment, you're probably doing something right, because they are now considering for bad things that could happen to their characters. And you want that. You want them to take that seriously. So, just a word of advice. Go ahead and use that in your games, and you'll watch your players work to try to thwart that as quickly as they can. Maybe even wasting spells on banishing magical darkness, just because it's such an abhorrent thing in their eyes. And the risk of what's inside. That's another thing that's important too about darkness, is that not only is it something that allows you to move around unnoticed and things like that, put it over a pit. That's kind of a jerk move, but if you put it over something that's an obvious obstacle that they would walk around if it wasn't for the darkness, makes it that much more terrifying. So, just some thoughts. You're welcome to them, and I hope to keep seeing you again in these future videos. I am the Dungeon Tutor, and I still have more videos to make for RPGaDay. I look forward to seeing you through those. So, until next time, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this, that I've treated you well and fairly, and that upon that next time that I see you, between that happy time and now, I hope that you, yes, you, get a chance to roll some dice, play some games, have some fun, but stay safe out there. Until that next time, Farewell.